Let's tell the story of Castaway Love. The sun shone brightly in the clear blue sky. The ocean stretched out endlessly, its deep waters sparkling under the warm light. The large school boat moved smoothly over the waves, carrying a group of excited students. Ethan leaned against the railing, his brown hair messy from the sea breeze. He wore a loose t-shirt and shorts, looking relaxed as always. He smirked as he watched his classmates chatting and laughing. "Not bad, huh?" he said to his friend Luke. Luke nodded. "Yeah, way better than sitting in class." A few feet away, Olivia sat on a bench, writing in her notebook. Her long dark hair was neatly tied in a ponytail, and her glasses sat perfectly on her nose. She didn't care about the ocean view. She was too busy making a list. Packing list, water bottle, sunscreen, emergency whistle, notebook. She sighed when she noticed Ethan laughing loudly with his friends. "He never takes anything seriously," she muttered to herself. Ethan caught her looking and grinned. "Hey, Olivia, you should try relaxing for once." She rolled her eyes. "And you should try acting like an adult." Ethan laughed. "Where's the fun in that?" The afternoon was warm and calm. The boat rocked gently over the waves. Then suddenly the wind changed. The waves grew stronger. The boat lurched to the side. The sky darkened, thick clouds rolling in fast. The captain's voice came through the speakers. "Everyone stay calm and take your seats. A storm is coming." Thunder rumbled in the distance. Olivia's stomach tightened. She gripped the bench. The first huge wave crashed against the boat. Students screamed as water splashed onto the deck. Ethan's smile disappeared. "Okay, maybe this isn't so fun anymore," he muttered. Lightning flashed across the sky. Then bam! A giant wave slammed into the side of the boat. Olivia was thrown forward. Her notebook flew from her hands. The boat tilted dangerously. The captain shouted, "Abandon ship! Get to the lifeboats!" Panic spread. Students rushed to the sides, trying to grab life jackets. Ethan's heart pounded. He grabbed a life vest and looked around. Where was Olivia? Then he saw her, stuck near the railing, frozen in place. Another huge wave crashed, knocking Olivia off balance. Ethan ran forward. "Olivia!" Before she could react, he grabbed her wrist. "Come on, we have to move." She hesitated, but another wave made her stumble forward into his arms. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's go." They made it to the lifeboat just in time. The moment they climbed in, another massive wave hit the ship hard. The boat snapped in half with a loud crack. The lifeboat rocked wildly as it drifted away from the sinking ship. Ethan and Olivia huddled inside, the rain soaking their clothes. The ocean raged around them, tossing the tiny boat like a toy. Lightning lit up the sky. Then, darkness. Everything went quiet. The storm passed, leaving only the soft sound of waves. Ethan slowly opened his eyes. His body ached. His clothes were heavy with seawater. He turned to see Olivia lying beside him, still. "Olivia?" His voice was rough. She groaned and sat up, looking around. Nothing but ocean. No ship. No other lifeboats. No land. Just them. Alone. The sun was rising, painting the sky soft shades of pink and orange. The ocean was calm now, gentle waves rocking the small lifeboat. Ethan slowly opened his eyes. His head hurt and his muscles ached from the long night. He blinked a few times, trying to remember what had happened. Then he saw Olivia. She was curled up on the other side of the boat, her clothes damp and her dark hair sticking to her face. For a second, he thought she was still unconscious. Olivia? His voice was rough. She groaned and sat up slowly, rubbing her head. Then suddenly, her eyes widened. She looked around. Only ocean. No ship. No rescue boats, just endless blue. Panic flashed across her face. She grabbed the sides of the boat and looked out desperately. Ethan sat up too, stretching his sore arms. Yeah, not exactly the field trip we signed up for, huh? Olivia turned to him, her face pale. Ethan, this isn't funny. We're lost at sea. Ethan sighed. Yeah, I noticed that. She clenched her fists. We need to do something. We need to... Before she could finish, Ethan pointed to the horizon. Or we could just look over there. Olivia whipped her head around. In the distance, past the rolling waves, a small strip of land appeared. An island. She gasped. Land! Ethan grinned. See? Problem solved. Olivia ignored him and grabbed a wooden paddle from the bottom of the boat. We have to paddle there before the current takes us away, she said urgently. Ethan stretched his arms. Or we could just wait for the waves to take us in. Olivia glared at him. Help me paddle, or I'll throw you overboard. Ethan chuckled. Bossy. But he picked up the other paddle and started rowing. It took almost an hour to reach the shore. As they got closer, the island came into focus. Tall palm trees, golden sand, and thick green jungle beyond the beach. The lifeboat bumped against the shore, and Olivia jumped out first, stumbling onto the warm sand. Ethan followed, stretching his tired legs. The island was silent except for the sound of waves. There were no people, no boats, no signs of life. Just them. We made it, Olivia whispered, catching her breath. Ethan plopped down on the sand and sighed. Yep, now what? She shot him a look. Now we find food, water, and shelter. Ethan leaned back, resting his hands behind his head. Or we could just chill for a bit. Olivia groaned. Ethan, this isn't a vacation. He smirked. You're the one who said you needed a break from school. She crossed her arms. This is not what I meant. Ethan chuckled, but deep down he knew she was right. They were alone. No phones, no rescue team. No idea if anyone would ever find them. For the first time, he felt a small knot of fear in his chest. Olivia took charge immediately. We need fresh water first, she said, brushing the sand off her clothes. We can only survive a few days without it. Ethan sighed but stood up. All right, boss, lead the way. They walked along the beach, looking for a river or stream. The sand was soft under their feet, and the air smelled like salt and trees. After 10 minutes, they found something. A small stream flowed through the jungle, clear and fresh. Olivia dropped to her knees and cupped some water in her hands. She took a small sip. It's fresh, she said, relieved. Ethan grinned. Great, now we just need a coconut and a beach chair, and we're set. Olivia stood up fast. Next, shelter. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Seriously, we just got here. Olivia frowned. We need to be ready in case it rains. Ethan sighed. Fine, but I get to pick the location. After another half hour, they found a flat area near the trees, close to the stream. Ethan gathered big sticks while Olivia collected palm leaves. They worked in silence. At first, the hut was a disaster. Ethan tried tying sticks together, but they kept falling over. Olivia rolled her eyes. Seriously, you can't even build a simple hut? Ethan groaned. Well, excuse me for not being a survival expert. They kept trying. After a few hours, the hut finally stood. It was small but solid, just big enough for the two of them to sleep in. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead. There, not bad, right? Olivia examined it. It'll do. Ethan smirked. Wow, a compliment from you? She turned away. Don't get used to it. Ethan laughed. As the sun set, the island glowed orange and pink. The waves were calm and the jungle whispered softly in the wind. Ethan and Olivia sat by their hut, exhausted. "We should start a fire tomorrow," Olivia said, "and look for food." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, we'll figure it out." For the first time, Olivia studied his face. He wasn't joking. He wasn't messing around. For the first time, Ethan looked serious. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely useless after all. She let out a small sigh. "Good night, Ethan." Ethan leaned back against the hut. "Night, Olivia." The stars twinkled above them. The waves sang their soft song, and on a deserted island, two people who once couldn't stand each other had no one else but each other. The sun slowly rose over the ocean. The waves were calm. The island was quiet except for the rustling trees and the sound of birds waking up. Ethan opened his eyes. His back ached from sleeping on the ground. For a moment he forgot where he was. Then he saw the little hut they built, the beach, the trees, the endless ocean, and Olivia still asleep beside him. His stomach growled loudly. Right, food. Ethan sat up and stretched. He glanced at Olivia, who was curled up under some palm leaves. Then she stirred and slowly opened her eyes. She blinked a few times, then sat up fast. "We're still here." Ethan smirked. "Yeah, no rescue boats in the night. Sorry." She sighed. "Well, we need to find food." Ethan patted his stomach. Agreed. They walked along the shore, searching for something to eat. The beach was covered in seashells, broken driftwood, and small rocks. The jungle was thick with green leaves and tall trees. Ethan picked up a coconut from the ground. "Hey, this could work." Olivia frowned. "How do we open it?" Ethan tapped it against a rock. Nothing. He hit it harder. Still nothing. Olivia sighed. "Here, let me try." She picked up a big rock and smashed the coconut. It cracked open, spilling clear water onto the sand. Ethan blinked. "Well, that worked." Olivia smirked. "You're welcome." They drank the coconut water and ate the white fruit inside. It wasn't much, but it helped. After resting for a bit, Olivia stood up. "We need real food." Ethan looked at the ocean. "Fish?" Olivia nodded. "But how do we catch them?" They walked along the beach until they found a long, sharp stick. Ethan grinned. "This could be a spear." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Do you even know how to fish?" "Nope, but how hard can it be?" They waded knee-deep into the water. The sun felt warm, and the waves lapped at their legs. Ethan held the stick above the water, waiting for a fish to swim by. Then, splash! Ethan lunged too early and missed completely. Olivia laughed. "That was terrible." Ethan groaned. "They're too fast." Olivia watched the water carefully. "Try moving slower." She picked up another stick and copied his stance. They waited. A small fish swam close. Olivia threw her spear fast and true. Stab! The fish stopped moving. Ethan's mouth fell open. Olivia lifted the fish. "See? It's not that hard." Ethan crossed his arms. "All right, now I have to get one." After a few more tries, Ethan finally caught a fish too. "Ha! Look at this beauty," he said, holding it up. Olivia smirked. "Took you long enough." Ethan rolled his eyes but smiled. They had food now. They were learning. They walked back to the hut with their fish. "Now we just need a fire," Olivia said. Ethan looked around. "There's dry wood in the jungle." They gathered sticks and dried leaves, piling them in a circle of rocks. Then came the hard part. "How do we light it?" Ethan asked. Olivia thought for a moment. "We need to make sparks." Ethan picked up 2 rocks and banged them together. Nothing happened. They tried rubbing sticks together. Nothing. Ethan groaned and flopped onto the sand. "We are going to starve." Olivia glared at him. "No, we are not." She kept trying. Minutes passed. Then, a tiny spark. Olivia gasped. She quickly blew on the embers, and soon small flames appeared. The fire grew, crackling warmly. Ethan sat up. "You did it!" Olivia smiled, proud of herself. "Now let's cook." They placed the fish on sticks and held them over the flames. Soon the smell of cooked fish filled the air. Ethan took a bite. It was simple, a little burnt, but the best thing he had ever tasted. Olivia ate too, sighing in relief. "We actually did it," she said softly. Ethan grinned. "We might not die after all." Olivia rolled her eyes but smiled a little. For the first time, she didn't mind being stuck with him so much. That night, they sat by the fire, listening to the waves. The stars twinkled above them, bright and clear. Ethan leaned back on his elbows. "You ever seen stars like this before?" Olivia shook her head. "Not like this." For a long time, they didn't argue. They didn't speak. They just sat there, watching the sky, the fire crackling softly beside them. And for the first time since the boat sank, Olivia felt safe. The morning sun rose slowly over the island. The waves were gentle and the sky was clear. Birds chirped in the trees and the air smelled fresh and salty. Ethan stretched his arms as he sat up. His back was sore from sleeping on the sand again. Next to him, Olivia was still asleep, curled up near the burnt-out fire. For a moment, Ethan just watched her. She didn't look as serious when she slept. Her face was calm, her breathing soft. But then, she stirred and blinked her eyes open. She sat up fast. "The fire went out." Ethan chuckled. "Good morning to you, too." Olivia ignored him and checked the fire pit. "We'll have to start it again later." She dusted off her clothes and stood up fast. "Come on, we have a lot to do today." Ethan groaned. "Seriously, it's so early." She crossed her arms. "Ethan, do you really want to sleep outside forever?" Ethan sighed. She had a point. "All right, boss," he said, standing up. "What's first?" Olivia looked around at the small hut they built yesterday. It was just sticks and leaves, barely enough to keep the wind out. "We need something stronger," she said. "Something that can keep us safe from storms." Ethan nodded slowly. "Okay, bigger, stronger, maybe even an actual roof?" Olivia smirked. "Exactly." They walked into the jungle, searching for materials. They needed stronger wood, large palm leaves for the roof, vines to tie things together. Ethan picked up a large branch. "This could work." Olivia nodded. "Good. We'll need a lot more." They spent hours gathering supplies. Ethan carried the heavy branches. Olivia collected vines and leaves. By midday, they had everything piled up on the beach. Now the hard part, building. At first, it was a mess. Ethan tried stacking the wood, but it kept falling over. Olivia tried tying the vines, but they weren't tight enough. They argued. "This isn't working," Olivia huffed. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead. "Yeah, no kidding." They both stood back, staring at the mess. Then Olivia sighed. "Okay, let's try again, but slower this time." Ethan nodded. "Fine, but let's make it fun." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Fun? We're building a house." Ethan smirked. "That doesn't mean we can't enjoy it." So they started over, this time working together. Ethan held the wood while Olivia tied the vines tighter. Olivia showed Ethan how to weave leaves for the roof. They laughed when Ethan almost got stuck under a wooden beam. By late afternoon, the hut stood strong. It was taller, wider, and sturdier. There was even a small doorway and a roof thick enough to keep out rain. Ethan stepped back and admired it. "Okay, I'll admit it," he said. "This is pretty awesome." Olivia smiled proudly. "Told you." Now that they had shelter, they needed other things to survive. So the next few days they worked on braiding baskets to store food and carry supplies, making a fire pit, a safer place to cook without burning down the hut, creating a rainwater catcher, using big leaves and rocks to collect fresh water. Ethan was surprisingly good at making baskets. Olivia laughed as he held up a perfectly woven one. Where did you learn to do that? Ethan smirked. YouTube. Olivia rolled her eyes but laughed anyway. One morning, Ethan woke up to find Olivia already gone. He frowned and looked around. Olivia? Then he spotted her near the jungle, picking fruit from a tree. She had gathered bananas, coconuts, and wild berries. Ethan raised an eyebrow. So you just, became an expert overnight? Olivia grinned. I read about it once. If the birds eat it, we can eat it too. Ethan grabbed a banana and peeled it. Well, this is way better than burnt fish. Olivia sat down next to him and took a bite of a berry. Yeah, it's starting to feel a little less like survival, and more like... She hesitated. More like what? Ethan asked. She looked at the hut, the baskets, the fire pit. Like home. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. Yeah, I know what you mean. That night, they sat by the fire again, but this time it felt different. The island wasn't just a place they were stuck in anymore. It was a place they built together. Ethan glanced at Olivia. For the first time since they got here, she looked relaxed. The firelight danced in her eyes, and for the first time, Ethan thought maybe she wasn't so bad. Maybe, just maybe. He liked having her around. The days passed, and Ethan and Olivia settled into a routine. In the morning, they gathered fruit and water. In the afternoon, they fished and checked their traps. In the evening, they sat by the fire, ate dinner, and talked. The island still felt lonely, but it wasn't as scary anymore. But then one afternoon, everything changed. Ethan stood on the beach, his feet in the warm sand, looking out at the ocean. Something felt wrong. The sky was darker than usual. Thick gray clouds stretched across the horizon. The waves were rough, crashing harder than before. He turned to Olivia, who was weaving another basket. Hey, Olivia? She glanced up. Yeah? He pointed at the ocean. That doesn't look normal, right? Olivia stood and followed his gaze. Her stomach tightened. The wind had changed, moving faster. The palm trees swayed harder. She swallowed. A storm is coming. Ethan frowned. How bad? I don't know, Olivia admitted, but we need to get ready now. They ran back to their hut. We have to make sure everything is secure, Olivia said quickly. If the wind is strong, it could tear the roof off. Ethan nodded. All right, let's do this. They tied extra vines around the hut to make it stronger. They moved their food baskets inside so they wouldn't blow away. They stacked big rocks around the fire pit to protect it from the wind. They collected dry firewood in case the rain put out their fire. The wind picked up as they worked. The ocean looked angrier, the waves crashing louder. Olivia's heart pounded. We have to hurry, she said. Ethan didn't argue for once. He grabbed the last pile of wood and ran into the hut. That night, the storm hit. The wind howled, shaking the trees. The rain poured down, drenching everything outside. Inside the hut, Olivia and Ethan huddled together, listening. Crack! A tree branch snapped somewhere outside. Ethan ran his fingers through his hair. Well, this is terrifying. Olivia hugged her knees. It'll pass. We just have to wait. The rain dripped through small gaps in the roof. Then, a huge gust of wind slammed into the hut. The roof lifted slightly, the vines struggling to hold. Ethan grabbed Olivia's wrist. It's not strong enough. They jumped up and pressed their backs against the walls, trying to keep it steady. The hut shook, the leaves ripping off the roof. Olivia's breath was shaky. Ethan, if this thing breaks, we need to... Boom! A flash of lightning lit up the sky. Then, crash! A nearby tree fell, missing their hut by just a few feet. Ethan's eyes widened. That could have crushed us. Olivia grabbed his arm tightly, her nails digging into his skin. Then, just as suddenly as it came, the storm started to slow. The wind weakened. The rain became softer. Ethan and Olivia stayed frozen for a few more minutes, listening. Then, finally, Ethan let out a long breath. That was insane. Olivia exhaled shakily. They both collapsed onto the floor, exhausted. Outside, the storm moved away, disappearing into the ocean. The hut was still standing barely. Their food and supplies were safe. They had survived. The next morning, everything was quiet. The beach was covered in fallen palm leaves and broken branches. The ocean was calm again. Ethan and Olivia stepped out of the hut, looking at the damage. Ethan let out a low whistle. Well, that was fun. Olivia stared at him. Are you serious? He grinned. Hey, we made it. That's a win, right? Olivia shook her head. You really don't take anything seriously, do you? Ethan sighed. Look, Olivia, I joke around because that's just how I handle things, okay? It doesn't mean I don't care. Olivia crossed her arms. Really? Because sometimes it feels like you don't. Ethan looked at her seriously. I do care. I care about surviving. I care about keeping us safe. And whether you like it or not, I care about you too. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. For a moment she didn't know what to say. Then she looked away. We should fix the hut. Ethan sighed but didn't argue. As they worked side by side, Olivia stole small glances at him. Maybe she was wrong about him. Maybe Ethan wasn't so bad after all. That night they sat by the fire again, eating fresh fish. The air was cool, the stars bright and clear. For once, Olivia wasn't thinking about getting rescued. For once, she was just here, in the moment. She glanced at Ethan, who was poking the fire with a stick, lost in thought. Then, before she could stop herself, she said softly, "Thank you." Ethan looked up. For what? For keeping me safe last night. Ethan's lips curved into a small smile. Wow, Olivia is thanking me? Should I write this down? She rolled her eyes. Never mind. He laughed. Hey, I'm serious. You're welcome. She didn't say anything else, but as she sat there watching the flames, she felt something new. Something warm. And for the first time, being stuck on this island didn't feel so bad. The days after the storm were different. The air was fresher, the sky clearer, and the ocean calmer. The island felt safe again, but something else had changed. Ethan and Olivia, they weren't just surviving anymore. They were working together. They weren't just tolerating each other. They were understanding each other. And little by little, they were becoming something more. The next afternoon, Ethan stood waist-deep in the ocean, holding a large fishing net. Olivia sat on the shore, arms crossed. You coming in or what? Ethan called. Olivia hesitated. I don't like swimming. Ethan frowned. Wait, you can't swim? Olivia sighed. I never learned, okay? Ethan smirked. Well, you're in luck. I'm an excellent teacher. She raised an eyebrow. You? A teacher? Ethan grinned. Come on, Liv. You trust me, right? She hesitated. Then, slowly, she stepped into the water. The waves brushed against her legs, and for a moment she felt nervous. But Ethan reached for her hand. I got you, he said, his voice softer than usual. Olivia swallowed. Okay. Step by step, he taught her how to kick her legs properly, how to float on her back without panicking, how to move with the waves, not against them. At first, she clung to him tightly, but after a while, she relaxed. And for the first time in her life, she swam. I'm doing it, she laughed. Ethan chuckled. Told you I was a great teacher. She rolled her eyes but smiled, and when he let go, she didn't sink. She felt free. That evening, Ethan and Olivia sat by the fire, drying off from their swim. Olivia held a small shell in her hands, turning it over between her fingers. She looked at Ethan. Thanks for today. Ethan smirked. Wow, another thank you? That's what, 2 now? She laughed softly. Ethan stared at her for a second too long. Her laugh, her smile, the way she had trusted him today. Something in his chest tightened. He cleared his throat. You know, I used to think you were just all rules and no fun. Olivia raised an eyebrow. And now? Ethan hesitated. Now I think you just never had the chance to relax. She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at him, something warm in her eyes. You're not what I expected either, she admitted. Ethan smirked. You mean incredibly handsome and charming? Olivia shook her head, laughing. No, I mean more than just jokes. Ethan stopped smiling. The way she was looking at him, he felt it. Something real. Something he wasn't ready to name yet, so instead, he threw a small rock at her playfully. Don't go getting soft on me, Liv. She rolled her eyes, but smiled. And that night, as they lay in their hut, listening to the soft waves outside, they both thought about each other, and neither of them could sleep. The days on the island were passing quickly now. What once felt like a survival mission had slowly turned into a way of life. Ethan and Olivia had built a stronger shelter, mastered fishing, and even started collecting fresh water from rain. But something else was happening. Something neither of them expected. They were getting closer. One morning, Olivia woke up to soft sunlight filtering through the hut. The air was warm and calm, and for the first time, she didn't feel worried about what they would eat or where they would sleep. She turned her head slightly. Ethan was still asleep next to her, his face relaxed, his breathing steady. His hair was messy, his arms stretched behind his head. He looked peaceful. Olivia swallowed. She suddenly felt too aware of how close they were. She quickly sat up, shaking her head. What is wrong with me? This was Ethan, the boy she used to find annoying, the boy who never took things seriously. And yet, something felt different now. She stood up quickly, dusting off her clothes. I'm going to check the fish traps. Ethan groaned, still half asleep. She walked off fast, trying to ignore the strange feeling in her chest. That night, they sat by the fire as usual. But for some reason, the air felt different. The stars were extra bright, the waves softer than usual. Olivia finished eating her fish and stretched her arms. Today wasn't so bad. Ethan smirked. You mean you actually had fun? She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. Ethan took a deep breath. Now or never. He pulled out the small white flower and held it out to her. Olivia blinked. What's that? He shrugged, trying to act casual. Saw it earlier, thought you might like it. Olivia stared at him. For a moment she didn't move. Then slowly she reached out and took the flower. Her fingers brushed against his for half a second too long. Her heart raced. Ethan scratched the back of his neck. It's stupid, I know. No, Olivia said quickly. It's nice. They sat there in silence, staring at the fire. But it wasn't the awkward kind of silence they used to have. It was something else, something new, something undeniable. Olivia twirled the flower between her fingers. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. Ethan already knew. That night, Olivia lay awake in the hut, the small white flower still in her hands. She turned it over, feeling its soft petals. Ethan had picked this for her. Ethan, the boy who never seemed serious. Ethan, the boy who used to drive her crazy. Ethan, who had been by her side every single day since they got here. She felt warm all over. This is bad. This is very, very bad. Because she wasn't just thinking about him anymore. She was feeling something for him too. And she didn't know what to do about it. The next morning, Ethan and Olivia walked along the beach, silent. Not because they were annoyed with each other, not because they were tired, but because something had shifted, and neither of them wanted to talk about it. Instead, Olivia held the small white flower in her fingers, and Ethan just watched her, his heart pounding. He had a feeling that nothing between them would ever be the same again, and for the first time, he didn't hate that idea at all. That evening, Ethan sat by the fire, poking the flames with a stick. Olivia sat across from him, twisting the wooden charm in her hands. It was quiet, except for the crackling fire. Then, out of nowhere, Olivia blurted out, We need to talk. Ethan looked up quickly. Okay. She took a deep breath, staring at the fire. We've been acting weird, she said. Ever since the storm. Ethan swallowed hard. Yeah. She hesitated. Then finally she turned to him. What are we doing? Ethan's heart pounded. This was it. This was the moment. He could joke, he could avoid it, he could pretend nothing had changed. But instead, he told the truth. I don't know, he admitted. But I know one thing. Olivia held her breath. What? He shifted closer, his voice quieter now. I can't stop thinking about you. Olivia's stomach flipped. She knew. She had known for days, maybe longer. She just hadn't wanted to admit it. But hearing him say it, that was different. That was real. Ethan reached out, his fingers brushing over the wooden charm in her hands. You kept it, he murmured. Olivia nodded slowly. Yeah. His fingers curled around hers, holding her hand gently. Olivia's breathing shook. She didn't pull away. She didn't want to pull away. Instead, she whispered, I can't stop thinking about you either. Ethan's chest tightened. This was real. This was happening. His fingers traveled up her arm, slow and careful, like he was waiting for her to stop him. But she didn't. Instead, she moved closer, and then he leaned in, and this time she let him. The fire crackled softly beside them. The air was thick with heat, but not from the flames. It was from them. Ethan's fingers lifted her chin, tilting her face toward his. Olivia's heart raced, but she didn't feel scared. She felt ready. And when Ethan finally closed the space between them, it was soft. It was slow. It was everything. Olivia melted into him, her fingers gripping his shirt like she didn't want to let go. Ethan's hands slid around her waist, pulling her closer. For a long time they just stayed there, lost in each other. The island, the fire, the past, the future, none of it mattered right now, because this was real. This was them, and nothing else existed. The next morning, Ethan and Olivia walked along the shore, their fingers intertwined. The waves brushed against their feet, the sun warm on their skin. Ethan glanced at her. So, what if we never get rescued? Olivia thought about it for a long time. Then she looked at him, a small smile on her lips. Then I guess I'm stuck with you. Ethan smirked. You say that like it's a bad thing. She laughed softly, and as they kept walking, the future no longer felt uncertain, because as long as they had each other, they had everything they needed.